right. What do we got here? Oh, sweet. I'll do a green screen next time. I don't need one right now. Cool. All right. Welcome, everybody, to another installment of Wicked. If you have been following along so far, you will know that we are more than halfway done with the book. You will also know that this book is not like the Broadway show, neither is it like the movie, soon to be movies. This contains adult themes, dark themes, adult themes. So if you are thinking, oh, cool, Wicked, my kids and I love the show, love the movie, this is not for little kids. Just as a quick disclaimer, this is for adults, teens and adults only, because there's some pretty adult dark themes in this book. So, um, that is the disclaimer. Just so you know, if you're watching this live, put your children away. This is not for them. And if you happen to be seeing this on YouTube later on after I've uploaded it, again, put your children away. This is not for them. You have been warned. Hi, Miss Debbie. Happy Monday. Real quick, can you hear me just fine? I think I have my volume up high enough, but if you could just let me know, that would be fantastic. I would greatly appreciate it. For anyone who happens to be new, hi, I'm Mimi. We do book readings. I do book readings every Monday here on YouTube. I got my start on TikTok, and you can see some of my regular TikTok content on YouTube here because I upload stuff regularly. But so I do book readings. We are reading Wicked at the moment, obviously. But if you have missed any of the previous readings of this book, don't panic. There's a playlist. It's numbered, it's listed, it's labeled, it's easy to follow along. You can't get lost. So if you want to stick around and listen to this installment, that's fine. You may be a little bit lost, but if you want to leave this video, come back after you've watched all of the videos that catch you up to this one, not a problem. You're not going to miss anything. But if Wicked isn't really your thing, I also have a selection of other stories that I have read so far up to this point. Um, all fiction, but the fiction kind of varies. Some of it's historical fiction, some of it's biblical fiction, some of it's just regular like sci-fi, some of it's fantasy. So it's a little bit of, hi Ishmael, how are you? It's a little bit of kind of everything at this moment in time in the fiction genre. I haven't done any nonfiction stuff yet. I haven't done any biographies, anything documentary type reads. Um, so, but if you have any suggestions, any books, any series that you would like me to check out and see if that might be something I'd be interested in reading to you guys, please let me know in the comment section. I am always looking for new books to read, new series to check out. Um, at the moment, I will be refraining from reading anything too terribly spicy. Just so you know, I would probably save that for an OnlyFans perhaps, and I don't have one of those. So nothing too terribly spicy. Just I'll look into your suggestions. Just nothing really like kind of racy. So, um, but what we do every Monday, like East Coast time from like 8 to 9, 15ish sometimes. It depends on the book. It depends on my voice. Depends on my eyeballs sometimes. It just depends. Um, we'll read, and so for about an hour every Monday from 8 to 9 ish. So if you want to catch me live, please feel free to do so. Meet up with us, all of us here hanging out. Um, I love reading to people live, but I mean, if you just don't have the time, that's totally cool. I get it. So, without further ado, because we're getting through. Like, here's where we've been, here's where we are. We're getting through at a pretty good clip. I think. We're doing a pretty good job, so. All right, well, without further ado, let us continue on. One brisk afternoon, he, meaning Fierro, sent off a proprietary, a proper, wow, a propitiatory package of bright wooden toys for the children and a jeweled torque for Sarima. The pack train was going around the Great Kells via the northern route. It wouldn't deliver Lurlenimus presents to Kiaumoko until well into the spring, but he could pretend to have sent them earlier. If the snows held off, he would be home by then, restless and chafing in the tall, narrow rooms of the mountain stronghold, but maybe he would get the credit for thoughtfulness. And perhaps deserved. Why not? To be sure, Sarima would be in her winter doldrums, as distinct from her spring moods, her summer ennui, and her congenital autumn condition. A torque eventually would cheer her up, at least a little. He stopped for a coffee in a cafe in a neighborhood just enough off the beaten track to be both bohemian and pricey. The management apologized. The winter garden, usually heated with braziers and brazen with expensive forced flowers, had been the site of an explosion the night before. The neighborhood is troubled. Who'd have thought it? Said the manager, touching Fiera on the elbow. Our glorious wizard was to have eradicated civil unrest. Wasn't that the whole point of curfews and containment laws? Fiero was not inclined to comment, and the manager took his silence for agreement. I've moved a few tables into my private parlor up the stairs, if you don't mind roughing it amidst my family memorabilia, he said, leading the way. Finding good Munchkinlander help to repair the damage is getting harder, too. The Munchkinlander TikTok touch. There's nothing like it. But a lot of our friends in the service sector have gone back to their eastern farms, scared of violence against them. Well, so many of them are so small. Don't you think they seem to provoke it? They're all cowards. He interrupted himself to say, I can tell you have no Munchkinlander relatives, or I wouldn't comment this way. My wife is from Nest Hardings, said Fiero, lying unconvincingly. But the point was made. I recommend the cherry chocolate frappe today. Fresh and delicious, said the manager, retreating into repentant formality, and pulling out a chair at a table near high old windows. Fiero sat and looked out. One fretted shutter had warped and couldn't fold back against the outer wall as designed, but there was still enough of a view. Roof lines, ornamental chimney pots, the odd high window box stuffed with dark winter pansies, and pigeons swooping and scissoring like lords of the sky. The manager was of that peculiar stock. After so many generations in the Emerald City, it seemed a separate ethnic strand. The paintings of his family showed the bright gimlet hazel eyes, and refined receding hairlines on men and women alike, and plucked into the scalps of children, too, in the fashion of the Emerald City, upwardly yearning middle class. At the sight of simpering boys in pink satin, with frizzy-headed lapdogs, and girlettes in womanish dark rouge, and plunging necklines, revealing their innocent lack of breasts, Fiero felt the sudden longing, again, for his own cold and distant children. Though bruised by their particular family life, and who wasn't, in his memory Irji, Manek, and Noor managed more integrity than these hothouse scions of a family on the make. But that was cruel, and he was responding to artistic convention, not to the actual children. He turned his gaze out the window when the order came, to avoid hideous art, to avoid the other people in the salon. Having coffee in the winter garden below usually provided a view of vine-covered brick walls, shrubs, and the occasional marble statue of some improbably beautiful and vulnerably naked stripling. However, from a flight up, one could see over the wall, into an interior mews area. One part was a stables, another a neighborhood toilet, apparently, and just within the range of his vision was the wall broken by the explosion. Some sort of twisted, thorny wire netting had been erected across the opening, which led into a schoolyard. As he watched, one of the doors of the adjacent school was pushed open, and a small crowd emerged, shaking and stretching into the sunlight. There seemed to be, Fierro peered, a couple of elderly quadling women and some adolescent male quadlings, straplings with early mustaches making a bluish colored shadow against their fine rose rust skin. 5, 6, 7 quadlings, and a couple of stout men who might have been part Gilliganese, it was hard to tell, and a family of bears. No, bears. Smallish, red bears. A mother and father and a toddler. The little bear went unerringly to some balls and hoops under the stairs. The quadlings made a circle and began to sing and dance. The old ones, with arthritic steps, joined their hands with the teenagers and moved in a widdershins pattern, in and out, as if making a clock face that reversed the clockwise movement of time. The stocky Gilliganese men shared a cigarette and gazed out the wiry barrier across the break in the wall. The red bears were more dispirited. The male sat on the wooden edge of a sandlot, rubbing his eyes and combing the fur below his chin. The female moved back and forth, kicking the ball just often enough to keep the cub occupied, then stroking the bowed head of her mate. Fierro sipped his drink and inched forward. If there were, what, 12 prisoners and only a wire fence between them and freedom, why didn't they rush it? Why were they separated into their racial and species groups? After 10 minutes, the doors opened again, and a gale forcer came out, trim and, yes, Fierro had to admit it at least, terrifying. Terrifying in the brick-red uniform with the green boots, and the emerald across the quartered breast of the shirt, one vertical strap from groin to high starched collar, the other strap from armpit to armpit across the pectorals. He was only a youth whose curly hair was so blond as to look nearly white in the winter sun. He stood with legs apart on the steps of the school's veranda. Though Fierro couldn't hear a thing through the closed window, the soldier apparently gave a command. The bears stiffened, and the cub began to wail and clutch the ball to itself. The Gilliganese men came and stood quiescently ready. The quadlings ignored the order and kept on with their dance. They swung their hips, and they held their arms at shoulder height, moving their hands in a semaphoric message, though what it meant Fierro could only guess. He had never seen a quadling before. The gale forcer raised his voice. He had a truncheon in a thong loop at his waist. The cub hid behind the father, and the mother could be seen to growl. Work together, Fierro found himself thinking, hardly aware he could have such a thought. Work as a team. There are 12 of you and only one of him. Is it your differences from one another that keep you docile? Or are their relatives inside who will be tortured if you make a break for freedom? It was all speculation. Fierro couldn't tell the dynamics of the situation, but he was riveted. He realized his hand was open, palm up against the glass of the window. Below, because the bears had not stood to join the lineup, the soldier raised his cudgel, and it came down on the skull of the cub. Fierro's body jerked. He spilled his drink, and the cup broke. Porcelain shards on the buttery herringbone-laid oak flooring. The manager appeared from behind a green baize door and tutted, and twitched the drapes closed, but not before Fierro had seen one last thing. Recoiling as if he had never hunted and killed in the 1,000-year grasslands, he averted his eyes, and they wheeled upward, where he glimpsed the pale blonde coins of faces, 2 or 3 dozen schoolchildren in the upper windows of the school, staring down with fascination and open mouths at the scene in their playing field. They have no concern for neighbors who have a business to run, bills to pay, and loved ones to feed, snapped the manager. You don't need to see those antics as you enjoy your coffee, sir. The disruption in your winter garden, said Fierro. That was someone trying to break down your wall into that yard and get them out alive. Don't even suggest it, shot the manager in a low voice. There are more ears in this room than yours and mine. How do I know who was up to what or why? I'm a private citizen and I mind my own business. Fiero didn't take a replacement cup of cherry chocolate. There were racking cries from the mother bear, and then a silence in the world outside the heavy damask drapes. Was it an accident I saw that? Fiero wondered, looking at the manager with new eyes. Or is it just that the world unwraps itself to you, again and again, as soon as you are ready to see it anew? He wanted to tell Elfie what he had seen, but he held back for reasons he couldn't name. In some way, in the balance of their affections, he sensed she needed an identity separate from his. Were he to become a convert to her cause, she might drift away. He did not dare to risk it, but the vision of the battered bear cub haunted him. He held Elfie the tighter, trying to communicate a deeper passion without speaking it. He noticed, too, that when she was agitated, she was the more liberal in her love-making. He began to be able to tell when she was going to say, "Not till next week." She seemed more abandoned, more salacious, perhaps as a cleansing exercise before disappearing for a few days. One morning, as he was stealing some of the cat's milk for his coffee, she rubbed some oil on her skin, wincing with sensitivity, and said over her shoulder of soft green marble, "A fortnight, my dear. My pet, as my father used to say, I need a fortnight of privacy now." He had a sudden pang, a premonition, that she was going to leave him. It was a way for her to get 2 weeks' head start. "No," he said. "That's not on, Fei-Fei. It's not all right. It's too long." "We need it," she expanded. "Not you and I. I mean the other we. Obviously, I can't tell you what we're about, but the last plans for the autumn campaign are falling into place. There's going to be an episode. I can't say more, and I must be available to the network at all times." "A coup?" he said. "An assassination? A bomb? A kidnapping? What? Just the nature of it, not the specifics. What?" "Not only can I not tell you," she said, "I don't even know. I'll be told only my small part, and I'll do it. I only know it's a complicated maneuver with a lot of interlocking pieces." "Are you the dart?" he said. "Are you the knife? The fuse?" She said, though he wasn't convinced, "My dearie, my poppet, I am too green to walk into a public place and do something bad. It's all too expected. Security guards watch me like owls on a mouse. My very presence provokes alarm and heightened vigilance. No, no. The part I'll play will be a handmaiden's part, a little assistance in the shadows." "Don't do it," he said. "You're selfish," she said, "and you're a coward. I love you, my sweet, but your protests about this are wrong-headed. You just want to preserve my insignificant life. You don't even have a moral feeling about whether I'm doing right or wrong. Not that I want you to, not that I care what you think about it, but I only observe. Your objections are of the weakest sort. Now, this isn't something to be argued. 2 weeks from tonight, come back." "Will the action be completed by then? Who decides?" "I don't know what it is yet, and I don't even know who decides. So don't ask me." Faye, he suddenly didn't like her code name anymore. "Elphaba, do you really not know who is pulling the strings that make you move? How do you know you're not being manipulated by the wizard? You are a novice at this, for all your status as a tribal prince," she said. "Why shouldn't I know if I was being a pawn of the wizard? I could tell when I was being manipulated by that harridan, Madame Morrible. I learned something about prevarication and straight talking back at Crage Hall. Give me the credit for having spent some years at this, Fiero." "You can't tell me for sure who is or isn't the boss." "Papa didn't know the name of his unnamed god," she said, rising and rubbing oil on her stomach and between her legs, but modestly turning her back to him. "It never is the who, is it? It's always the why." "How do you hear?" How do they tell you what to do? Look, you know I can't say. I know you can. She turned. Oil my breasts, will you? I'm not that stupidly male, Elphaba. Yes, you are, she laughed, but lovingly. Come on. It was daylight. The wind roared and even shook the floorboards. The cold sky above the glass was a rare pinkish blue. She dropped her shyness like a nightgown, and in the liquid glare of sunlight on old boards she held up her hands, as if, in the terror of the upcoming skirmish, she had at last understood that she was beautiful, in her way. The collapse of her reticence frightened him more than anything else. He took some coconut oil and warmed it between his palms, and slid his hands like leathery velvet animals on her small, responding breasts. The nipples stood, the color flushed. He was already fully dressed, but recklessly he pressed himself against her mildly resisting form. On one hand slid down her back. She arched against him, moaning, but perhaps this time not from need. Still his hand moved down onto her buttocks, felt between her cheeks beyond, felt the place one muscle pulled in crookedly, endearingly, felt the very faintest etching of hair beginning its cross-hatched shadows, its swirl toward vortex. He worked his intelligent hand, reading the signs of her resistance. I have 4 companions, she said suddenly, wrenching away in a motion soft enough not to disengage but to discourage. Oh, heart, I have 4 comrades. They don't know who our cell leader is. It's all done in the dark, with a masking spell to shadow the voice and distort the features. If I knew more, the Gale Force could catch me and torture it out of me. Don't you see? What is your object? He breathed, kissing her, loosening his trousers again, as if it were the first time, his tongue tracing the twisting funnel of her ear. Kill the wizard, she answered, looping her legs around him. I am not the arrowhead. I am not the dart. I am just the shaft, the quiver. She cupped more oil in her hand, and as they slid and fell into the light, she made him bright and anguished with oil, took him deeper in than ever before. Even after all this time, you could be an agent for the palace, she said later. I'm not, he said. I'm good. A little snow fell one week, then some more the next. The feast of Lurlinimus drew nearer. The Unionist chapels, having appropriated and transformed the most visible parts of the old pagan beliefs, hung themselves shamelessly in green and gold, set out green candles and golden gongs and green berry wreaths and gilded fruit. Along Merchant Row, shops outdid themselves, and the churches, in decor, with displays of fashionable clothes and useless and expensive trinkets. In display windows, paper mache figures evoked the good fairy queen Lurline in her winged chariot, and her assistant, the minor fairy Prunella, who strewed gift-wrapped delights from her capricious magic basket. He asked himself again and again if he was in love with Elphaba. He also asked himself why he was so late coming to this question, after 2 months of a passionate affair, and if he knew what the words even meant, and if it mattered. He chose more gifts for the kids and for sulky Sarima, that well-fed malcontent, that monster. He missed her a little. His feelings for Elphaba seemed not to vie with those for Sarima, but to complement them. No 2 women could be more unalike. Elphaba demonstrated the proud independence of Arjiki mountain women that Sarima, married so young, had never developed. And Elfie wasn't just a different, not to say novel, provincial type. She seemed an advance on the gender. She seemed a different species sometimes. He caught himself with a mammoth erection just remembering that last time, and he had to hide himself behind some ladies' scarves in a shop until it subsided. He bought 3, 4, 6 scarves for Sarima, who didn't wear scarves. He bought 6 scarves for Elphaba, who did. The shop girl, a dull Munchkinlander midget who had to stand on a chair to reach the till, said over his shoulder, Just in a minute, ma'am. He turned to make room at the counter for the other customer. But Master Fiero! Cried Glinda. Miss Glinda, he said, flabbergasted. What a surprise! A dozen scarfs, she said. Look, Crope, look who's here. And there was Crope, a little jowly, though he couldn't be 25 yet, could he? Looking guiltily up from a display of feathery, plumy things. We must have tea, said Glinda. We must. Come now, pay the nice little lady, and off we fly. In her voluminous skirts she rustled like a corps of ballerinas. He hadn't remembered her quite so giddy. Maybe this was married life. He slid a glance at Crope, who was rolling his eyes behind her back. Just you put this on Sir Chuffrey's account, and this, Glinda said, mounting things on the counter, and have them sent along to our rooms in the Florenthwaite Club. I'll need them for dining, so have someone run over with them right now, if you would. How dear, so kind. Ta-ta! Boys, come along. She gripped Fiero with a pinching hand and steered him away. Crope followed like a lapdog. The Florwenthwaite Club was only a street or two over, and they could easily have carried the purchases back themselves. Glinda capered and clattered down the grand staircase into the oak parlor, making enough noise so that every female resident looked up in a rewarding sort of disapproval. Now you, Crope, there, so you can be mother and poor when we've ordered, and dear Fiero, you here, right next to me. That is, if you're not too married. They ordered tea. Glinda got used to him a bit and began to calm down. But really, who would have thought it? She said, picking up a biscuit and putting it down again, about 8 times in a row. We were the great and the good at shiz, really. Look at you, Fiero. You're a prince, aren't you? Do we call you your highness? I never could. And you're still married to that little child? She's grown up now, and we have a family, Fiero told her warily. 3 children. And she's here. I must meet her. No, she's back at our winter home in the Great Kells. Then you're having an affair, said Glinda, because you look so happy. Who with? Anyone I know? I'm just happy to see you, he said. And in fact he was. She looked wonderful. She had filled out some. That wraith-like beauty had bloomed, but not coarsened. She was more woman than waif, more wife than woman. Her hair was cut short in a boyish style, very becoming, and there was a tiara-like thing in her curls. And now you're a sorceress. Oh, hardly, she said. Can I even get that damned serving girl to hurry up with the scones and jam? I cannot. Yes, I can sign 100 greeting cards for the holiday season at one go, but it's a very minor talent, I tell you. Sorcery is vastly overrated in the popular press. Otherwise, why wouldn't the wizard just magic the hell out of his adversaries? No, I'm content to try to be a good partner for my Chuffrey. He's at the exchange today, doing financial thingies. Oh, do you know who else is in town? It's too rich. Crope, tell him. Crope, surprised to be given an opening, choked on his mouthful of tea. Glinda rushed in. Nestle Rose! Can you believe it? She's at the family home over there in Lower Menipin Street. An address that's come up quite a lot in the past decade, I might add. We saw her where, Crope, where? It was the Coffee Emporium. It was the Ice Garden. No, I remember. It was the Spangletown Cabaret. Fiero, do you know? We went to see that old Scillipede. Do you remember? No, you don't. I can see it in your face. She was the singer who was performing at the Oz Festival of Song and Sentiment the day our glorious wizard arrived out of the sky in a balloon and orchestrated that coup. She's making yet another of her innumerable comeback tours. She's a bit camp now, but so what? It was gales of fun. And there, at a better table than we had, I might tell you, was Nessie. She was with her grandfather. Or is it the great-grandfather? The eminent Throp? He must be 1,100 years old by now. I was shocked to see her until I realized she went merely to provide him an escort. She didn't think much of the music. She scowled and prayed all through the entr'acte, and the nanny was there too. Who would have imagined it, Fiero? You're a prince, and Nessa Rose just about installed as the next eminent throp, and Averick, of course, the Margrave of Ten Meadows, and humble little me married to Sir Chuffrey, holder of the most useless title and the biggest stock portfolio in the Pertha Hills. Glinda almost stopped for breath, but lunged on kindly. And Crope, of course, dear Crope. Crope, tell Fiero all about yourself. He's dying to know. I can see it. Actually, Fiero was interested, if only for a rest from the staccato chatter. He's shy, Glinda pushed on. Shy, shy, shy. Always was. Fiero and Crope exchanged glances and tried to keep their mouths from twitching. He's got this so avant-garde little palace of a loft apartment on the top floor of a doctor's surgery. Could you imagine? Stunning views, the best views in the Emerald City, and at this time of year. He dabbles a bit in painting, don't you, dear? Painting, a little musical operetta set design here and there. When we were young, we thought the world revolved around Shiz. You know there's real theater here now. The wizard has made this a much more cosmopolitan city, don't you think? It's good to see you, Fiero, said Crope. Say something about yourself, fast, before it's too late. You cad. You kid me mercilessly, sang Glinda. I'll tell him about your little affair with... Well, never mind. I'm not that mean. There's nothing to say, Fiero said, feeling even more taciturn and vinous than he had when he first arrived in Shiz. I like my life. I lead my clan when they need it, which isn't often. My children are healthy. My wife is, well, I don't know. Fertile, supplied Glinda. Yes, he grinned. She's fertile, and I love her, and I'm not going to stay much longer, as I'm meeting someone for a business conference across town. We must meet, said Glinda, suddenly plaintive, suddenly looking lonely. Oh, Fiero, we're not old yet, but we're old enough to be old friends already, aren't we? Look, I've gushed on like a debutante who forgot to splash on her eau de demure. Woo! I'm sorry. It's just that that was such a wonderful time, even in its strangeness and sadness. And life isn't the same now. It's wonderful, but it isn't the same. I know, he said, but I don't think I can meet you again. There's so little time, and I have to go back to Kiamoko. I've been away since the late summer. Look, we're all here. Me and Chuffrey, Crope, Nessa Rose, you. Is Averick around? We could get him. We could get together, and we could have a quiet dinner together in our rooms upstairs. I promise not to be so giddy. Please, Fiero, please, your highness. It would do me such an honor. She cocked her head and put a single finger to her chin, elegantly, and he could tell she was struggling through the language of her class to say something real. If I think I can, I'll let you know, but please, you mustn't count on it, he said. There'll be other times. I'm not usually in town so late in the season. This is an anomaly. My children are waiting. Have you children, Glinda? Chuffrey is dry as two baked walnuts, said Glinda, making Crope choke on his tea again. Before you go, I can see you're getting ready to dash. Dear, dear Fiero, what do you hear from Elphaba? But he was prepared for this, and had readied his face to be blank, and he only said, Now that's a name I don't hear every day. Did she ever turn up? Surely Nessa Rose must have said. Nessa Rose says if her sister ever does turn up, she'll spit in her face, Glinda remarked. So we must all pray that Nessa Rose never loses her faith, for that would mean the evaporation of such tolerance and kindness. I think she would kill Elphaba. Nessa was abandoned, rejected, left to look after her crazy father, her grandfather thingy, that brother, that nurse, that house, the staff. And you can't even say single-handedly as she doesn't have any hands. I thought I saw Elphaba once, said Crope. Oh, said Fiero and Glinda together, and Glinda continued, You never told me that, Crope. I wasn't sure, he said. I was on the trolley that runs along the reflecting pool by the palace. It was raining, some years ago now, and I saw a figure struggling with a big umbrella. I thought she was about to be blown away. A gust of wind blew the umbrella inside out, and the face, a greenish face, which is why I noticed, ducked down to avoid the splash of rainwater. You remember how Elphaba hated getting wet? She was allergic to water, Glinda opined. I never knew how she kept herself so clean. And I, her roommate. Oil, I think, said Fiero. They both looked at him. That is, in the Vinkus, he stammered, the elderly rub oil into their skin instead of water. I've always assumed that's what Elfie did. I don't know. Glinda, if I were to meet up with you again, what's a good day? She rooted in her reticule for a diary. Crope took the opportunity to lean forward and say to Fiero, it is really good to see you, you know. You too, said Fiero, surprised that he meant it. If you ever get out into the central Kells, come stay at Kiamoko with us. Just send word ahead, as we're only there for half a year at a time. That's just your speed, Crope, the wild beasts of the untamed Vinkus, said Glinda. I think the fashion possibilities, all those leather thongs and fringe and such, they might interest you. But I can't see you as Mr. Mountain Boy. No, probably not, agreed Crope. Unless it affords fabulous cafes every 4 or 5 blocks, I don't think a landscape quite developed enough for human habitation. Fiero shook hands with Crope and then, remembering the rumors about poor Tibbet's deterioration, kissed him. He threw his arms around Glinda and hugged her hard. She laced her arm through his and walked him to the door. Do let me shake off Crope and have you back all to myself, she said in a low voice, her patter evaporating into seriousness. I can't tell you, dear Fiero. The past seems both more mysterious and more understandable with you right here before me. I feel there are things I could yet learn. I don't want to wallow, dear boy, never that. But we go way back. She held his hand between hers. Something's going on in your life. I'm not as dumb as I act. Something good and bad at the same time. Maybe I can help. You were always sweet, he said, and motioned to the doorman to hail a hansom cab. How I regret that I won't meet Sir Chuffrey. He moved out the doorway, across the marble entrance pavement, and turned to tip his hat at her. In the doors, the doorman held them open to enhance his parting view. She was a calm, resigned woman, neither transparent nor ineffectual. Even, it might have been said, a woman full of grace. If you see her, said Glinda lightly, tell her I miss her still. He didn't see Glinda again. He didn't call at the Florentthwaite Club. He didn't stroll past the Throp family house in Lower Menipin Street, though he was sorely tempted. He didn't stop a scalper to try to get one of the tickets to Silipede's triumphant 4th annual comeback tour. He found himself in the chapel of St. Glinda in St. Glinda Square, from which he could sometimes hear the cloistered monks next door chanting and susurrating like a swarm of bees. When the 2 weeks had passed at last, and the city had worked up to a froth over Lurlinimus, he went to see Elphaba, half expecting she would have vanished. But there she was, stern and loving, and in the midst of making a vegetable pie for him. Her precious Malky was putting his feet in the flour and making paw prints all over the room. They talked awkwardly until Malky upset the bowl of vegetable stock, and that made them both laugh. He didn't tell her about Glinda. How could he? Elphaba had worked so hard to keep them all at bay, and now she was engaged in the major campaign of her life, the thing she had been working toward for 5 years. He did not approve of anarchy. Well, he knew he was in lazy doubt about everything. Doubt was much more energy efficient than conviction. But even after seeing the bear cub struck down, he had to keep an even, cautious relationship with the power on the throne, for the sake of his tribe. Also, Fiero didn't want to make Elfie's life harder than it was, and his selfish need to be comfortable with her surmounted his need to gossip. So he didn't tell her Nessa Rose and Nanny were in town either, or had been. For all he knew, he rationalized silently, they had already moved on. I wonder, she said that night as the stars peered through the crazy frost pattern on the skylight, I wonder if you should get out of town before Lurlinimus Eve. Is all hell going to break loose? I told you, I don't know the whole picture. I can't know. I shouldn't know. But maybe some hell will break loose. Maybe it would be best for you to go. I'm not going, and you can't make me. I've been taking correspondence courses in sorcery on the side. I'll go puff and turn you into stone. You mean you'll make me hard? I'm already hard. Stop. Stop. Oh, you wicked woman. You have bewitched me again. Look, it has a mind of its own. Fiyero, stop. Stop. Now look, I mean it. I want to know where you're going to be on Lurlinimus Eve, just so I can be sure you're not going to get hurt. Tell me. You mean we won't be together? It's a work night for me, she said grimly. I'll see you the next day. I'll wait here for you. No, you won't. I think we've covered our tracks pretty well, but there's still a chance, even at this late date, that somebody could come here to intercept me. No, you stay in your club and take a bath. Take a nice, long, cold bath. Got it? Don't even go out. They say it might be snowy by then anyway. It's Lurlinimus Eve. I'm not going to spend the holiday in a bathtub all alone. Well, hire some company. See if I care. As if you don't. Just stay away from anything social. I mean theater, or crowds, or even restaurants, please. Will you promise me that? If you could be more specific, I could be more careful. You could be most careful if you left town completely. You could be most careful if you told me, give over with that. Cut it out. I don't think I even want to know where you are, come to think of it. I just want you to be safe. Will you be safe? Will you stay inside, away from drunken pagan celebrations? Can I go to chapel and pray for you? No. She looked so fierce that he didn't even tease her about it again. Why should I keep myself so safe? He asked her, but he was almost asking himself. What is there in my life worth preserving? With a good wife back there in the mountains, serviceable as an old spoon, dry in the heart from having been scared of marriage since she was 6, with 3 children so shy of their father, the prince of the Arjikis, that they will hardly come near him, with a careworn clan moving here, moving there, going through the same disputes, herding the same herds, praying the same prayers, as they have done for 500 years, and me, with a shallow and undirected mind, no artfulness in word or habit, no especial kindness toward the world. What is there that makes my life worth preserving? I love you, said Elphaba. So that's that then, and that's it, he answered her and himself. And I love you, so I promise to be careful. Careful of us both, he thought. It's getting serious now, kids. So he stalked her again. Love makes hunters of us all. She had swathed herself in long dark skirts, like some sort of a religious woman, and tucked up her hair inside a tall, wide-brimmed hat with a crown like a cone. There was a dark scarf, purple and gold, wound around her neck and pulled over her mouth, though she would need more than a scarf to mask that lovely prow of a nose. She wore elegant, tight-fitting gloves, a nicer type of accessory than she usually went in for, though he feared it was to allow for nimbler control of her hands. Her feet were lost in big, steel-toed boots like the kind worn by miners in the Gilkis. If you didn't know she was green, it would be hard to tell in this dark afternoon, in this raking skittle of snow. She didn't look behind her. Perhaps she didn't care if she was being followed. Her circuit took her around some of the major squares of the city. She ducked in for a minute to the chapel of St. Glinda next to the Montree, the one where he had first seen her. Perhaps she was getting last-minute instructions, but she didn't try to give him, or anyone else, the slip. She emerged in a minute or two. Or perhaps, perish the thought, she was actually praying for guidance and strength. She crossed the Law Courts Bridge. She wandered along the Ozma embankment and cut diagonally through the abandoned rose gardens of the Royal Mall. The snow pestered her. She kept twining her cape the more tightly around. The silhouette of her thin, dark-stocking legs in those huge comical boots showed up against the snowy blankness of the Oz Deer Park, now of course bereft of deer and deer. She marched, head tucked down, past the cenotaphs and obelisks and memorial tablets of the magnificent dead of this escapade or that. The decades, Fiyero thought, in love with her, or at least so frightened for her that he could mistake it for love, the decades looked on and didn't notice her passing. They stared from their fixed mounts across at each other and didn't see revolution striding between them, on her way to destiny. But the wizard must not be her aim. She must have told the truth in saying that she was too untried and too obvious to be selected as the wizard's assassin. She must be involved in a diversionary tactic, or in taking out a possible successor or high-level ally. For tonight, the wizard would be opening the anti-royalist revisionist exhibit of struggle and virtue at the People's Academy of Art and Mechanics near the palace. Yet at the top of the Shiz Road, Elphaba struck out sideways, away from the palace district, cutting through the small, fashionable district of Goldhaven. The homes of the filthy rich were guarded by mercenaries, and she clopped past them on the pavements, past the stable boys out sweeping the snow off the pavement with their brooms. She did not look up or down or back over her shoulder. Fiyero guessed he was the more ostentatious figure, striding in his opera cape in the snow 100 paces behind. At the edge of Goldhaven was perched a small bluestone jewel of a theater, the Ladies' Mystique. In the shallow but elegant square before it, white lights and gold and green spangles hung in profusion, looped from street light to street light. Some holiday oratorio or other was scheduled. He could only read "Sold Out" on the board in front, and the doors weren't yet opened. The crowd was gathering. Some vendors sold hot chocolate in tall ceramic glasses, and a crowd of self-approving youngsters amused themselves and bothered some elderly people by singing a parody of an old Unionist hymn of the season. The snow came down on all, on the lights, the theater, the crowds. It landed in the hot chocolate. It was churned to mush and ice on the bricks. Bravely, foolishly, without decision or choice, it felt like, Fiyero climbed the steps of a nearby private library to keep an eye on Elphaba, who lost herself in the crowd. Was there to be a murder in the theater? Was there to be arson? The innocent Sybarites roasted like chestnuts? Was it a single mark, an appointed victim? Or was it mayhem and disaster, the more, the worse, the better? He didn't know if he was there to prevent what she was about to do, or to save whomever he could from the catastrophe, or to tend anyone hurt accidentally, or even maybe just to witness it, so he could know more about her, and love her or not love her, but know which of the two it was. She was circulating through the crowd, as if trying to locate someone. He believed, incredibly, that she didn't know he was there. Was she so intent on finding the right victim, and he didn't fill the bill? Could she not feel her lover in the same open-air square with her as the wind moved the curtains of snow? A phalanx of gale forcers appeared from an alley between the theater and a school next door. They took up their places before the bank of glass doors in front. Elphaba mounted the steps of an ancient wool market, a kind of stone gazebo. Fiyero saw that she had something under her cloak. Explosives? Some magic implement? Did she have colleagues in the square? Were they lining themselves up with one another? The crowd kept getting thicker as the hour for the oratorio drew near. Inside the glass doors, house management was busy lining up stanchions and stringing velvet ropes to promote a genteel entry into the hall. Nobody pushed and shoved into a public space like the very rich, Fiyero knew. A carriage came around the corner of a building on the far side of the square. It couldn't come right up to the doors of the theater, as the crowds were too dense, but it proceeded as far as it was able. Sensing the presence of someone with authority, the crowd drew a little still. Could this be the elusive wizard, or an unannounced visit? A coachman in a tech fur headpiece flung the door open and reached his hand in to assist the passenger in alighting. Fiyero held his breath. Elphaba stiffened into petrified wood. This was the target. Out into the snowy street, in a tidal wave of black silk and silver spangles, swept a huge woman. She was magisterial and august. She was Madame Morrible, no other. Even Fiyero recognized her, having met her only once. He saw that Elphaba knew that this was the one she must kill. She had known this. In an instant, all was dead clear. If she was caught and captured and tried, her motivation couldn't be more wonderful. She was merely a mad student from Madame Morrible's own Crage Hall. She carried a grudge. She never forgot. It was too perfect. But could Madame Morrible be involved in intrigue with the wizard? Or was this just a diversion to take the mind of authorities away from some more urgent target? Elphaba's cape twitched. Her hand went up and down inside it, as if priming something. Madame Morrible was growling a greeting to the crowd, which, while not necessarily knowing who she was, appreciated the spectacle, if not the bulk, of her arrival. The head of Crage Hall walked 4 steps toward the theater, on the arm of a tick-tock minion, and Elphaba leaned a little forward from under the wool market. Her chin was now sharply jutting out from the scarf, her nose aiming forward. She looked as if she could snip Madame Morrible into shreds, just using the serrated blades of her natural features. Her hands continued to figure out things beneath the cape. But then were thrown open the front doors of the building Madame Morrible was walking past. Not the theater, but the adjacent school, Madame Testane's female seminary. Out the doors swarmed a cluster, a little upper-class mob of schoolgirls. What were they doing in school on Lordlinimus Eve? Fiyero caught Elphaba looking wildly surprised. The girls were 6 or 7, small, creamy lumps of uncurdled femininity, spooned into furry muffs and tucked into furry scarves and tipped into boots with furry edges. They were laughing and singing, raucous and rough as the elite adults they would become. And in their midst was a pantomime player, someone being the fairy Prunella. It was a man, as the convention had it, a man done up in silly clown-like makeup, and mock bouncing bosom, and a wig with an extravagant skirts, and a straw hat, and a huge basket with trinkets and treasures spilling out. "Oh, la société!" he fluted at Madame Morrible. "Even Fairy Prunella can have a present for the lucky pedestrian." For a moment, Fiyero thought the man in drag was going to pull out a knife and kill Madame Morrible right in front of the children. But no, espionage was organized, but not that organized. This was a real accident, a disruption. They hadn't figured on there being a school occasion this evening, nor on a screaming flock of schoolgirls greedily tugging at an actor in skirts and falsetto. Fiyero turned back to look at Elphaba. Her face struggled with disbelief. The children were in the way of whatever she was supposed to do. They were a small, unruly mob, chasing around the head, teasing Prunella, leaping up at him or her, grabbing for presents. The children were the accidental context, noisy, innocent daughters of tycoons, despots, and butcher generals. He could see Elphaba working. He could see her hands fighting with each other, to do it anyway, to keep from doing it, whatever it was. Madame Morrible pushed on, like a huge float in a Remembrance Day parade, and the doors of the theater opened for her. She passed grandly into safety. Outside, the children danced and sang in the snow. The crowd surged this way and that. Elphaba crumpled and sank back against a pillar, shivering with self-loathing so violently that Fiyero could see it from 50 yards away. He began to push toward her, devil come what may, but by the time he reached the steps, she had, for the first and only time, managed to lose him. The audience filed into the theater. The children shrieked their song in the street, awash with greed and joy. The carriage that had brought Madame Morrible around was able to draw up in front of the theater and start its long wait for her to come out again. Fiyero paused, unsure, in case there was a backup plan, in case Elphaba had something else up her sleeve, in case the theater exploded. Then he began to worry that, in the few minutes of losing sight of her, Elphaba had been rounded up by the gale force. Could they have whisked her out of sight that fast? What should he do if she became one of the disappeared? At a clip, he headed back across town. Mercifully, he found a waiting cab, and he had the cab drive him directly to the street of warehouses adjacent to the military garrison in the city's 9th district. In a state of profound agitation, he arrived back at Elphaba's little eyrie atop the corn exchange. As he climbed the stairs, his bowels suddenly turned to water, and it was only with effort he managed to make it to the chamber pot. His insides slopped noisily, wetly out, and he held his perspiring face in his hands. The cat was perched atop the wardrobe, glaring down at him. Voided, washed down, and at least loosely done up again, he tried to coax Malky with a bowl of milk. She would have none of it. He found a couple of dried crackers and ate them miserably, and then pulled on the chain to open the skylight, to help air the room. A couple of plops of snow fell in and sat there, not melting. It was that cold in the damn place. He went to build up a fire, pulled open the iron door of the stove. The fire caught, then flared, and the shadows detached themselves and moved as shadows will, but these shadows moved fast, across the room, at him before he could register what they were, except that there were 3, or 4, or 5, and they were wearing black clothes, and black char on their faces, and their heads were wrapped in colored scarves like the ones he had bought for Elphaba, for Sarima. On the shoulder of one he saw the glint of a gilded epaulet, a senior member of the Gale Force. There was a club, and it beat down on him, like the kick of a horse, like the falling limb of a tree hit by lightning. There must be pain, but he was too surprised to notice. That must be his blood, squirting a ruby stain on the white cat, making it flinch. He saw its eyes open, twin golden green moons, befitting of the season, and the cat then scarpered through the open skylight and was lost in the snowy night. The youngest Mont was obliged to answer the convent door if the bell sounded during mealtime. In fact, she was clearing away the remains of pumpkin soup and rye brisques, the other Monts already wafting, in a cerebral mood, toward their cloister chapel upstairs. She hesitated before deciding to answer the bell. In another 3 minutes she, too, would have been losing herself in devotions, and the bell would have gone unheeded. She had rather get the dishes to soak, frankly, but the seasonal cheer bullied her into charity. She opened the huge door to find a figure crouched like a monkey in the dark corner of the stone porch. Beyond, snow was wrinkling the facade of the adjacent church of St. Glinda, making it look like a reflection in water, only right way up. The streets were empty, and a noise of choirs came filtering out of the candle-lit church. "What is it?" said the novice, remembering then to add, "Good Lurlinimus, my friend." She decided, once she saw the blood on the odd green wrists, that the darting look in the eyes, that holiday decency requiring her to drag the creature inside. But she could hear her sister Monts assembling in their private chapel, and the mother Mont beginning to sing a prelude in her silvery contralto. This was the novice's first big liturgical event as a member of this community, and she didn't want to miss a moment of it. "Come with me, Dolly," she said, and the creature, a young woman a year or two older than she was, managed to straighten up enough to walk, or hobble, like a cripple, like a person so malnourished that their extensors cannot flex, and their limbs look as if they are about to snap. The novice stopped in a washroom to rinse the blood off the wrists, and to make certain that it was indeed splattered mess from the beheading of some hen or holiday supper, and not a sad attempt at suicide. But the stranger recoiled from the sight of water, and looked so deranged and unhappy that the novice stopped. She used a dry towel instead. The Monts were beginning antiphonal chants upstairs. How maddening! The novice took the path of least resistance. She dragged the forlorn thing down toward the winter salon, where the old retired biddies lived out their lives in a haze of amnesia and the discreetly placed clumps of marginium plants, whose sweet miasma helped mask the odors of the old and incontinent. The crones lived in a time of their own. They couldn't be carted upstairs to the sacred chapel anyway. "Look, I'll sit you down here," she said to the woman. "I don't know if you need sanctuary or food or a bath or forgiveness, whatever, but you can stop here, warm and dry and safe and quiet. I'll come back to you after midnight. It's the feast day, you see. It's the vigil service. Watch and wait and hope." She pushed the haunted woman into a soft chair and found a blanket. Most of the crones were snoring away, their heads nodding on their breastbones, dribbling softly onto bibs ornamented with green and gold berries and leaves. A few were telling their beads. The courtyard, opened in summer, was now walled in with glass panels for the winter, so it looked like a square fish tank in an aquarium. Snow falling in it always made them peaceful. "Look, you can see the snow, white as the grace of the unnamed God," said the novice, remembering her pastoral requirements. "Think on that, and rest and sleep. Here's a pillow. Here's a stool for your feet. Upstairs we'll be singing and praising the unnamed God. I'll pray for you." "Don't," said the green, ghostly guest, then slumped her head against the pillow. "It's my pleasure to," said the novice a bit aggressively, and fled, just in time to catch the processional hymn. For a while the winter salon was still. It was like a fishbowl into which a new acquisition had been dropped. The snow moved as if done by a machine, gently and mesmerizingly, with soft churr. The blossoms of the marginium plants closed a bit in the strengthening cold of the room. Oil lamps issued their funereal crepe ribbons into the air. On the other side of the garden, hardly visible through the snow and the two windows, a decrepit Mont, with a more precise grasp of the calendar than her sisters, began to hum a saucy old pagan hymn to Lurline. Up to the shivering figure of the newcomer came one of the elders, inching forward in a wheeled chair. She leaned forward and sniffed. From a cloak of plaid blanket, blue and ivory, she pawed her old hands along the armrests. She reached out and touched Elphaba's hand. "Well, the poor dolly is sick. The poor dolly is tired," said the ancient thing. Her hands felt, as the novices had done, for open wounds on the wrists. "Nothing. Though intact, the poor dolly is in pain," she said, as if approving. A dome of near balding scalp came into view under the hood of the blanket. "The poor dolly is faint. The poor dolly is faltering," she went on. She rocked a bit and pressed Elphaba's hands between her own, as if to warm them, but it was doubtful that her anemic and incompetent old circulatory system could heat a stranger when it could scarcely heat itself. Still, she kept on. "The poor poppet is failure itself," she murmured. "Happy holidays to one and all. Come, my dear, lay your breast on old mother's bosom. Old Mother Mont will set things right." She couldn't quite pull Elphaba out of her position of dreamless, sleepless grief. She could only keep Elphaba's hands tightly clutched within her own, as a sepal sockets the furls of a young petal. Come, my precious, and all will be well. Rest in the bosom of mad Mother Yackle. Mother Yackle will see you home. All right. So that will bring us to the end of our read for the evening. That was wild. Clearly, something has gone horribly wrong on lots of different levels. So, I will be very anxious to see where this goes next week. Thank you all so very much for joining me this evening. It is always my pleasure to read to you. Again, every Monday from like 8 to 9-ish, little after maybe, you will find me here. So please, by all means, join me as I read to you live. But if not, I hope you enjoy this video once it uploads. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Until then, stay safe, stay hydrated, and I will see you next Monday. Bye.